Hey, good morning, y'all. What is today? Today's Monday, the day after Easter. So, next day, put in the same outfit for continuity. And I want to jump right in. This is part 3 of the Color Mixing for Painters tutorial. And by way of review, we dealt with the limited palette of primary and secondary colors. And in the last segment, we talked a lot about complementary colors and how they exhibit different qualities. One quality being that when they're next to each other in their original state, red next to green, violet next to yellow, blue next to orange, that they amplify each other. The red seems more red next to a green, the yellow seems more yellow next to a purple, that kind of thing. The other quality that they have is when you mix them together, they result in this whole range of earth tones. And these are the colors that we actually encounter in the world more often than we encounter these primary and secondary colors. So getting familiar with complements and mixing them in a scale like this will familiarize you with things that you'll see in the world, and then you'll have a better chance of, I called it reverse engineering last time, there's a better word for it, I'm sure, but it gives you a better chance of saying, oh yeah, that color there, that is blue, I can feel the blueness in it, but it's not just blue, obviously. There's something else, maybe orange. So you'll be able to see in neutral colors that you find in the world what their parent colors are, or what their parent color is, and what other things are modifying it. Great. And that gray that I was thinking about last time from Henry Miller's book, Quiet Days and Cliché, is called Payne's Gray, P-A-Y-N-E-S, Payne's Gray. And it's sort of a cool gray. You see it a lot in watercolors. Anyway. So let's start. Let's start with I'll hold off on value structure for a minute. What I want to introduce now with this 6-part color wheel, so far we have primary colors, yellow, red, and blue, and secondary colors, green, orange, and violet. I want to introduce the tertiary colors. Tertiary is third string. It's what happens in between the primaries and the secondaries. So we'll take one example. Let's go between yellow and green. So one of the benefits of doing this as an exercise, and I recommend you do it for all of the tertiary colors, meaning what colors exist between violet and blue, between blue and green. One benefit is that you'll get more familiar with a palette knife and the physical material of paint. The other benefit is that you'll learn to tune colors, to adjust them just enough so that they land correctly. And that's very useful in painting. So let's go between yellow and green. So I'm going to make myself a little space here. I'm going to move yellow over a bit. And in fact, this whole beautiful run that we made from orange to ultramarine blue, I'm going to scrape it all together into one neutral sort of mush to give ourselves some room to work. And you'll notice this paint now is 2.5 days old, 2 days old on the palette, and it hasn't been covered, but I did add clove oil to it when I first put it on the palette. And as I talked about in the first segment of this, clove oil is a non-drying oil that you can add to oil paint, which will extend the working time of it. If I hadn't added clove oil, these paints, because they also have beeswax in them, would have skinned over by now and been a lot more difficult to work with. Okay, so these also are not very large palettes, so depending on how big you're painting, what your needs are, you can cut a bigger piece of glass and work it out to a scale that makes sense for you. I have a really big palette underneath this board that I use, and it's a great size, but even then I think I could go a little bit bigger. Okay, so we've got in between green and yellow. So what I'm trying to do now, and this is it's a tricky thing to explain, but I'm trying to come up with a third color, a tertiary color, that is not overly influenced by either parent color and is in a way equally different from both. So we wanted to arrive really in the center, to have an identity that's both equally different from each parent color and not more influenced by one or the other. And those two ways of framing the question, sometimes one is more helpful, sometimes another is more helpful. So you'll see as we go. So what I'm going to do here is just start with the yellow and add a little bit of green to it, because my feeling is that green is a stronger pigment. So I want to add strong to weak. So I start with the weaker pigment, or the lighter. I want to add dark to light. I start with the lighter pigment and I add the darker. And you can see this really is pretty dominated by green. And this, I think, is the most difficult pairing to create a tertiary color from that is equally different from both parent colors, because really all the way until it reaches yellow, it's going to feel like it belongs to the green family more than the yellow. So in every other pairing that we would mix, that question, is it more influenced by one parent or another, is very helpful. In this case, the other question to ask, is it equally different from each parent color, is more useful. Because again, our visual association with it is generally going to be green, green, green all the way until it is virtually yellow. But if we look at it through the other lens, which is let's find a state of difference that's equally different from each parent color, it's more helpful, it's easier to locate the color correctly. So that might sound a little funny, but it's over a handful of years and trying to work this stuff out and communicate it to people, that seems like a good way to phrase the question. When the first question, are these equally, is this color equally influenced by either parent or not influenced by either parent? That seems to be, wait, I can articulate that better. We want this color to not be more influenced by either parent. We want it to exist in a state of independence from either of the original colors, not overly influenced by either one. That's one way to phrase it. But in this case, the more helpful way to phrase it is this new color equally different from both parent colors? Okay, that might be better. So we're going to need some more yellow. Okay, so there is our cadmium yellow light hue, which indicates that it's a synthetic pigment. And I'm going to add some clove oil to it right now so that it stays in step with the other colors. Okay, cool. So here we go. Add a little more yellow to this. Now, again, our brains, our eyes are going to say, yeah, that's a light green, buddy. But if I look at it through the other perspective, is this equally different from both parent colors? What that means is I sort of want to block out the yellow while I'm comparing this new color to the sap green. So when I block out the yellow and look, I can see a strong degree of difference between the yellow green and the green. Then if I block out the green and look from the yellow to the yellow green, I get to see the range of difference there. So really what we're gauging is distance, difference. We're gauging difference. So when I look from there, I see a certain distance, and from there. So I would say this color, although visually, mentally, I say it belongs to the green family, in terms of its difference from either parent color, I would say it's equally different from both, or in fact, it might be a little more different from the sap green. So I can reel it back a little bit by adding a little more sap green to it. And I overshot it a little bit, so I'll add some more yellow to adjust for that. Okay, so then I've got a color like that, which maybe you can see in this light. And I think that's a pretty good stand-in for a tertiary color, something that exists in the middle of the primary and secondary colors of yellow and green. Now, once we have that color, and just like we did with the neutral scale between the complements, we want to get the color right on our palette before we add it here. So there is our tertiary color. Now I'm going to do one more tertiary color before we move into value structure. But the idea, if you wanted to be, if you wanted to do this right, you would go through and locate all the tertiary colors on your color wheel. And if you had a larger piece of illustration board or, not poster board, too thin, but something durable, right? Light colored cardboard or poster board or illustration board, then you could spread the circle out a little more, have more room to put your observations on. And then that could be your standing record for all of these principles that we're learning about. So it'll be reliable to you in your studio, your house, wherever it is. Okay, so let's do another pairing. I'm gonna choose, let's see, I'd say between red and violet. So I'll move the red over a little bit to make some room. Now, this is darker and that's lighter, but my feeling is that the red is a stronger pigment. This cadmium red deep is pretty powerful. So stronger than the cobalt violet, I think. So I'm going to start with the cobalt violet and then add some red to it. Now again, we're looking for a degree of difference, an equality of difference between the tertiary color and its two parent colors. So now it feels, both in value and color, like it belongs too much still to the violet family. So we just add more red and move it along. So we're looking simultaneously for a color that is not overly influenced by either parent color and is equally different from either parent color. And we can see that value difference, meaning darkness, is a strong differentiating feature in this color because the purple is a good bit darker than this cadmium red deep. So I would say this color still is belonging too much to the purple, although it's getting closer. It's getting closer to an independent, equally distinct third color, tertiary color. And all the while we're getting familiar with this palette knife and the material and how to mix color in a manageable space. Okay, so now, can you see that? I want to look at degrees of difference. So there's my red, there's my purple, and there's that. When I look from there to there, I see more difference still than I do between these two. So I'm going to continue adding red to this to adjust it a little further into the middle. All right, and that just suddenly made the shift. So now this color feels, maybe it could use a little more red. So you can see that you can start to tune these colors to land very specifically. And that's, that's nice just as a general capacity, a general skill. And it's also really helpful in painting because you'll want colors to do certain things that are very subtle, particular. All right, that feels good. So the degree of difference here is significant and here is significant. So it feels pretty close to the middle. Now you could decide, no, it's not close enough. I want to go a little further with it and make it even more finely tuned, and you should totally do that if that's what you see. All right, so then we've got our mix and we add it in between these two parent colors. So if we continued, as you might continue, you'd have one there, 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 and there. So then you'd have a more subtly shifting color wheel that graduated from warm to cool and through all these color families. Great. Okay, so the other thing that I want to talk about today is value structure. Value structure is, I would say, one of the most important and easy to overlook aspects of color. One way you can experiment with value structure is to look out the window, like if you're in your house or your studio, wherever you are, look out the window with open eyes during the day, and you'll see all kinds of things. Lights and darks out the window, lights and darks inside the room. But then if you squint down, what I can see here, if I squint down, when I look out the window, the white plaster walls are so much darker than anything that's happening out the window for the most part. So even though my brain tells me that the plaster walls are white, and you should do this in your house because here it's through video and the lighting is not going to be as true as it is for you where you are. So wherever you are, just look around with open eyes and see things, and then squint down and see how darkness, middle tones gather things together. So what you'll generally find during the day, if you're looking out the window, with open eyes, there's lights and darks everywhere. But when you squint down, usually things out the window as a whole event will be a lot lighter than the window frame or the door frame or the wall inside. That's value structure. So value structure is basically the underlying lightness, darkness, or middle toneness of any given event. And squinting down is the best way we have for assessing relative darkness. Because when we squint down, it reduces the surface details and it reduces the chroma, the intensity of color, so that we're able to see more in contrast. Okay, so value structure is critical. Okay, I'm gonna pause for one moment because I want to get us black so that we don't have to use the blue for this.